up on Arirang News. In South Korea, starting Monday, masks are no longer mandatory in most indoor spaces. But health authorities have provided guidelines for where they're still required or advised. Restoring inter-Korean relations and improving human rights in North Korea are some of Seoul's key plans. This is according to the Unification Ministry's report to the president under the Yoon administration's so-called audacious initiative. The U.S. economy finished 2022 with better than expected growth. The fourth quarter gross domestic product rose at a 2.9% annualized pace amid lower inflation and a solid labor market. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea, and thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with the mask rule change this evening. Indoor mask mandate will no longer be in place starting Monday here in the country, but there will still be a number of places where mask wearing is required or advised. Our Shinse-byuk leads us off.
Starting January 30th, people in South Korea will no longer have to wear masks indoors. This marks the end of the 3-year-long mandate. However, mask wearing will still be required at high-risk facilities. The first is public transportation, including taxis and flights. But people don't have to wear masks when standing on the platforms, inside bus and train stations, and at airports. Medical and care facilities are also deemed high-risk, meaning masks are a must. But when people are in their own private rooms alone or with caregivers or people who they share the room with, it is not necessary. Though not required in these situations, it's highly recommended for people to wear masks.
Those in high-risk groups and those in the 3 Cs, spaces that are closed, crowded, or involve close contact, are still highly recommended to wear masks indoors.
Also, those with respiratory problems are highly advised to wear a mask. People who have had close contact with someone who tested positive for COVID-19 are also recommended to wear a mask for at least 2 weeks from the date of contact. Places where people tend to chant, sing, or talk a lot are other examples where masks are encouraged. Meanwhile, ahead of schools reopening, the Education Ministry has also published a set of guidelines. The rule of thumb is students don't have to wear masks in schools or at academies. But they will when on the bus to school, their academies, or field trips. The ministry plans to announce other measures for schools before the spring semester begins regarding a self-testing app as well as sanitizing and ventilation rules. Shinse-byuk, Arirang News.
As the nation is seeing a decline in the number of new cases of coronavirus, the health authorities are set to cut the number of hospital beds for COVID patients. Vaccination programs for infants will also be rolled out next month. Our Lee Dae-yeon tells us more.
South Korea is soon going to reduce the number of hospital beds set aside for people with COVID-19.
Considering the recent drop in the number of new COVID-19 cases, the government is going to reduce the number of hospital beds for COVID patients to around 3,900 from the second week of February.
3,900 beds are reportedly enough for 140,000 new daily cases. That would be a decline from the current number of such beds, which is a little over 5,800. The decision came as the rate of COVID spread declined for a third week in a row. The utilization rate of hospital beds for severely ill patients is a little over 20%, which is a level considered stable. On the vaccine front, doses will become available for babies as young as 6 months starting February 13th. So far, they've only been for kids as young as 5. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency said Friday that this is to protect infants from the COVID-19 resurgence this winter, which has seen the emergence of new variants. The youngest children will get 3 doses of the Pfizer vaccine in intervals of 8 weeks. The vaccine will be available at 1,000 government-designated hospitals, which will be listed on South Korea's COVID-19 vaccination homepage next Monday. Reservations will be available from that date online and by phone. Meanwhile, the health authorities announced Friday that short-term travel from China will continue to be restricted until the end of February due to concerns that the Lunar New Year holiday in China may have worsened the spread of COVID-19. All passengers from China, Hong Kong, and Macau will have to submit a negative test taken no more than 48 hours before their arrival and will have to take another test once they get to Korea. The officials left open the possibility of relaxing those rules sooner in February if it becomes clear that China's COVID-19 situation is improving. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's Ministry of Interior and Safety will this year revamp the country's national safety system as well as support balanced regional development. That's according to the plans presented by its minister Lee Sang-min to President Yoon Suk-yeol this Friday. The ministry will strengthen the country's disaster management system using ICT and provide support to those who suffer damage from disasters. It'll also work to protect the public against real estate fraud, voice phishing, and stalking. Civil air defense drills ceased since 2017 will resume, and safety management of facilities for children will be strengthened. On top of that, the government will support regional businesses and the relocation of enterprises from the capital region to other areas around the country. In its beginning of the year report to the top office, Seoul's Unification Ministry today revealed its core policies for this year that are aimed at mending inter-Korean relations. Its key plans are to restore dialogue with Pyongyang and to improve the human rights situation for the people of North Korea. Kim Mo-kyun with the details.
Normalizing inter-Korean relations by officially kickstarting the Yoon administration's so-called audacious initiative is one of the South Korean government's core inter-Korean policies for the year 2023.
We will specify the details of the government's audacious initiative by taking into consideration not only the regime's economic situation, but also its political and military situation. We will strengthen efforts to implement the initiative together with the United States.
That's what Unification Minister Kwon Young has said in a press briefing after his beginning of the year report to President Yoon Suk-yeol. There, Minister Kwon said 7 key policy objectives have been laid out to the top office, largely aimed at laying the groundwork for peace on the Korean peninsula. In order to pursue such plans, amid ties frayed by the regime's continued missile launches, the government plans to actively seek breakthroughs through both direct and indirect contact with North Korea, be it through civic groups or international organizations. A senior Unification Ministry official explained this is why Minister Kwon has lately been meeting with the heads of UNICEF and the World Food Program to seek ways to reach out to the North. If talks resume, the ministry hopes to restart repatriation programs and reunions for separated families, and also to cooperate in agriculture, forestry, and responding to natural disasters. The ministry also vowed to boost efforts to improve the human rights situation in Pyongyang.
We will publish our annual report on the North's human rights records and provide it in both Korean and English.
Alongside this, the ministry will push for the swift launch of the North Korean Human Rights Foundation, which has been delayed for years by political wrangling. In the meantime, the ministry will see through the work of the foundation until it's officially launched. Also, to help South Koreans understand North Korea better and rebuild a sense of cross-border nationhood, the ministry is considering allowing public access to the regime's official newspaper, the Rodong Sinmun, in designated places. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
South Korea is working to expand major projects to honor the foreign veterans of Korean War, marking 70 years since the ceasefire reached in 1953. Reporting to President Yoon Suk-yeol today, the Minister of Patriots and Veterans Bang Min-sik said the government will hold a special ceremony in July to honor foreign veterans from the 22 nations that fought alongside the South in the war that lasted from 1950 to 53. The government will also seek changes to a law on international veterans to expand eligibility for services to not only to those who defended freedom in active combat, but also to those who sent South Korea material aid. Also, it'll raise the monthly pensions paid to Korean veterans by 5.5%, the biggest increase in 15 years, and expand their access to quality medical services. A senior U.S. expert on North Korea claims Pyongyang has refrained from conducting a nuclear test thus far because its leader, Kim Jong-un, sees no need to do so as of yet. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has more on his remarks.
A senior U.S. intelligence advisor says the North will continue to build on its nuclear leverage this year, with more provocations and the testing of new weapons. Sidney Seiler, the National Intelligence Officer for North Korea at the U.S. National Intelligence Council, was speaking Thursday local time at a webinar hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. But he noted the regime understands the overwhelming strength of the alliance between South Korea and the U.S., and that it's fully aware of Washington's commitment to the defense of Seoul. Seiler also pointed out that the reason North Korea has not conducted its 7th nuclear test yet, even after completing preparations, is because leader Kim Jong-un doesn't see a need to do so. He said Kim will make the decision after calculating the development need, the demonstration need, the diplomatic need, and the domestic need, and that if the North's goal is to portray a constantly improving and exponentially growing nuclear threat, the nuclear test itself is not so critical. His remarks come as officials from South Korea and the U.S. have been saying since last spring that the North has completed preparations for its first nuclear test since 2017. It also comes 2 days after the CSI has issued a report on what it called dramatic and ongoing construction at the Seoul Satellite Launching Station, which is the North's main rocket launch site. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Surpassing market expectations, the U.S. economy expanded at a 2.9% annualized rate in the fourth quarter of 2022, largely on the back of rise in consumer spending. Yoon with more.
2022 was a year of global economic hardship, and the United States was no exception. But resilient consumer spending and a strong labor market helped the U.S. economy finish 2022 in solid shape. After reporting negative growth rates in the first and second quarters, things started looking up in the third quarter, which marked a 3.2% increase. The U.S. Commerce Department reported Thursday that in the fourth quarter, the country's GDP rose at a 2.9% annualized pace. Though slightly lower than the pace in Q3, this figure is higher than projections from economists on how the year would end. Consumer spending, which accounts for about 2/3 of GDP, showed an increase of 2.1% for the fourth quarter. Positive, but slightly down from the 2.3% in the previous third quarter. Overall growth, having decreased in the fourth quarter compared to the third quarter, shows a loss of momentum in boosted consumer spending, mainly due to the effects of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy tightening cycle that's been changing more quickly than any time since the 1980s. Retail sales were strong starting the fourth quarter, but weakened sharply towards the end of the period, and manufacturing looks to have joined the housing market, which has gone into recession. While there are signs that the housing market is stabilizing, with the Fed slowing the pace of its rate hikes on mortgages, inventory accumulation, which played a big role in adding to GDP last year, is forecast to take a downward turn with demand slowing. Though the labor market has shown resilience, economists are now arguing that with business conditions deteriorating, companies may be slow to hire, that is, if they don't have to lay off workers. 2023 is expected to be another year of economic uncertainty, as questions still persist over whether the U.S. economy can maintain the positive trend in the year ahead. Yoon, Arirang News.
South Korean tech giant LG Electronics posted its highest ever annual sales last year, but its profitability weakened. The company on Friday reported sales of around 83.4 trillion Korean won, or roughly $67.6 billion US dollars. This is up about nearly 13% from the previous year. The rise was on the back of strong performances from its home appliances and electric vehicle parts businesses. However, in terms of operating profits, LG saw an on-year decrease of 12.5% to about 3.5 trillion won, or almost $2.9 billion. This was due to a fall in demand amid global inflation and rising marketing costs. LG reported an earnings shock in the fourth quarter, with its operating profits plunging by over 90% from the year before. People in South Korea are eating less and less rice, and last year's consumption levels hit a new low. Data from Statistics Korea released on Friday shows people per person on average consumed 0.4 kilograms less than the year before at around 56.7 kilograms. This means that the average person is eating around 1 bowl of rice a day, which is only half of what was consumed 30 years ago. Rice consumption has been steadily falling since 1985, and the continued drop is being attributed to the surge in the number of single-person households and rising demand for ready-to-eat meals. With this, consumption by companies that manufacture pre-cooked rice products went up by 27% on year. South Korea and Cambodia seek to further strengthen their ties through business opportunities. It was in line with this goal that the two nations came together today to promote trade and investment awareness on the back of the recently implemented bilateral free trade agreement. Our foreign affairs correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea has been aiming to strengthen its economic partnership with ASEAN countries. And one way it has been trying to do this is by seeking to further boost relations with Cambodia, a critical ASEAN member state. The two countries on Friday held their first business and investment forum in Seoul, with South Korea's Minister for Trade and Cambodia's Minister of Commerce both taking part.
Last November, President Yoon unveiled South Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy for freedom, peace and prosperity. He also revealed a new policy approach toward the Indo-Pacific's key partner, ASEAN, known as the South Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Plan. Through this, we intend to pursue common prosperity and development by supporting the transformation of ASEAN's economic structure and securing South Korea's growth at the same time.
Friday's forum is not only timely, but also highly relevant, as a Cambodia-Korea free trade agreement came into force last month.
I'm convinced that not only would this agreement serve as a potential platform where the two countries could elevate bilateral relations to a new level, deepening exchanges and cooperations in economy and trade.
The agreement, which came into force in December 2022, has become a gateway for boosting trade volume between South Korea and Cambodia. With the majority of the tariffs lifted, the FTA has allowed Cambodia to export goods such as agricultural products and textiles, while South Korean products like electronic devices and automobiles have gone the other direction. Under the agreement, South Korea and Cambodia are not only seeking to increase trade volume, but also the creation of investment opportunities and cooperation between the private and public sectors in both countries. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Starting next Monday, major banks in South Korea will revert back to their pre-pandemic opening hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. A source in the banking industry said Friday that the Korea Federation of Banks has approved the change for major commercial and savings banks. The change follows the recent government decision to lift the indoor mask mandate from next week. Banks had been operating from 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. for the last year and a half under social distancing measures. A documentary about the so-called father of video art, Baek Nam-jun, has been chosen as one of the finalists for the 2023 Sundance Film Festival Awards. It's called Nam-jun Baek. Moon is the oldest TV and was made by Korean-American director Amanda Kim. Famous Korean-American Hollywood actor Steven Yeun is an executive producer. The documentary tells the story of Baek as a pioneer artist. Sundance Awards will announce the winners of this year's awards on January 27th. With the easing of strict border controls and social distancing rules, more and more overseas artists are touring Korea again to entertain an audience hungry for music. And we're definitely expecting more to come as the indoor mask wearing rule will be lifted from next week. Our Song Yu-jin met a group of talented young singers who are visiting Korea for the first time since the outbreak of COVID-19.
Angelic melodies. Gifted musicians with voices of unforgettable beauty, a UNESCO World Heritage. These words aren't enough to describe the Vienna Boys Choir. They're no doubt the most famous and prestigious children's choral group in the world, and also one of the oldest existing choirs founded by Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I back in 1498. Based in Vienna, Austria, the group consists of 100 boys between the ages of 10 and 14 from dozens of nations. The choir has been traveling around the world since 1924, performing to 500,000 people every year. They're finally back in South Korea for the first time since 2020. It's the first country in Asia the boys are touring after they hit the road again following a 2.5-year pandemic hiatus. Before the pandemic, the choir had been regularly performing in Korea since 1969.
This year is especially meaningful as it marks the 525th anniversary of our choir. It's also been a while since we performed in South Korea, so we prepared a lot of Korean songs in our program. I'm not sure if I'll be good at it, but I'm planning to introduce a few songs in Korean.
The boys are divided into 4 subgroups when they go on tour, and there's a Korean choir singer among the 23 boys visiting this time, 13-year-old Yoon.
I sang children's songs and learned vocal music when I was in Korea. Then my choir teacher suggested that I apply for the Vienna Boys Choir. I sent them a video and got accepted.
The boys hope their voices can offer comfort and lift up some spirits as everyone, including themselves, has been struggling with the unprecedented challenges posed by the pandemic.
We were so sad that we couldn't tour or perform during the pandemic. We couldn't see the bright, smiling faces of the audience. We're so grateful.
It was indeed a tough time for all of us, so we want to convey our joy and excitement to the Korean audience.
The young musicians will start their tour of South Korea from Friday. They'll perform concerts at 5 cities before their last stop, the Seoul Art Center, where they'll hold their New Year's concert on February 4th and 5th. 송유진, Arirang News.
Here in capital Seoul, the city is looking to rebrand itself with the new slogan. Back in August last year, city officials launched their search for a new slogan to boost Seoul's competitive edge on the global stage. And following a survey of 2,000 members of the public, 4 candidates have made it to the final round. They are Seoul for You, Amazing Seoul, Seoul My Soul, and Make It Happen Seoul. Now, yet another public survey on the final 4 is open on the city's website until the end of this month. Then the city will announce the winning slogan to replace the current I Seoul You in February.
Severe cold weather and icy conditions will persist through this weekend. In fact, a surge of colder air will be filtering into the nation overnight, and conditions will get even more frigid tomorrow. Morning temperatures will be especially cold in Seoul, with lows plunging all the way down to minus 12 degrees Celsius. The extreme cold will ease off on Sunday afternoon. A large part of South Korea will be under snowfall tomorrow. Central regions will see fairly less, with only light snowflakes flying around. Other regions, such as Chungcheongnam-do and Jeollado provinces, will see 1 to 3 centimeters. And regions with higher elevation, such as mountainous areas of Jeju Island, will see up to 7 centimeters. Frost and ice will appear on the roads for the time being, so please take extra precautions when driving. Tomorrow's Seoul and Daejeon will be cold at minus 12 degrees. Highs in Seoul will get up to minus 2, Daejeon 0, Gwangju and Gyeongju will be reaching 1 degree Celsius. Conditions will get a tad warmer next week with daytime readings in the positive territory. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all for this Friday night's newscast. Thank you for staying with us. Have a great weekend.
춥지 않은가요?